covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
Hello, Kentucky, and welcome to this first Friday of fall 2025. I don't know where you're listening from, but where I'm sitting right now, it's a beautiful day, comfortable day, thankful to the Lord for it. And my name is Greg Williams. I'm the president and CEO of Building Healthy Relationships, known as Love and Lordship. And you're listening to Kentucky's Voice on 970 WGTK, or possibly viewing on WBNA 21, where faith, family, and freedom are the priorities. I'm excited to host today's program as we discuss the cultural, legal, and spiritual issues that affect our Commonwealth and nation, and how we as people of faith and conviction can respond with integrity and courage in truth and love. Now, before I jump in, I want to let you know about two major events coming up in the next few days. I have to plug these as their executive directors are my co-host on the Authority of Love radio broadcast and podcast. That's Adia Wushner of Kentucky Right to Life and David Walls of the Family Foundation. The first event is the Kentucky Family Forum, which will be held tomorrow, Saturday, the 27th, put on by the Family Foundation from 10 to 4 at Embassy Suites in Lexington. And they already have the largest crowd in the 3 years of this event, but they've been given more seating. So if you're interested, go to KentuckyFamily.org to find out more and join us. Also on Monday, October the 6th, Kentucky Right to Life is having their annual Tee Off for Life golf outing, followed by their Proudly Pro-Life grand reception, both at the Shelbyville Country Club. Call their office at 502-895-5959 for info and to register. I hope to see many of you at both of these wonderful and worthwhile events. Now, with that said, I have to start today's program on a rather somber note, as another hero of the faith passed away yesterday, one of mine, and I know many others, Dr. Vaughty Bauckham, at the young age of 56. I didn't used to think 56 was that young, but I do these days. If you don't know about him or haven't listened to any of his messages or read his books, I highly recommend you do so. Let me also say that, as I do with all recommendations, I haven't found a book yet, except for the Bible and, of course, our own book, my wife and I, that I fully agree with, which means that you may not agree with everything said in his books or mine, but I hope you agree with all that's found in God's Word. That being said, this is now 4 giants of the faith that have passed in just the last few weeks. Dr. Vaughty Bauckham, who I just mentioned, Dr. John MacArthur from Grace Community Church in California, Charlie Kirk, which probably most all of you have heard about just in the last few days, and then Dr. James Dobson. All of them were extremely influential by God's grace and favor to impact our world with his gospel message. I can say that each one of them, in particular, Dr. Bauckham, Dr. MacArthur, and Dr. Dobson, were extremely influential in my younger life, as I've shared before. Dr. Dobson's messages, oftentimes you'll hear a little bit more about this, and that's going to be a key point today on our show with our guests. But I found his messages much more holistic in the gospel of Scripture than many of the messages I was hearing in the churches, and that had a tremendous impact on my life. Dr. Dobson, in particular, was the founder of Focus on the Family in the late 70s. I think he started with a message in Cincinnati, Ohio, right up the road from where I am right now, in 1977. And it just ballooned. I think God had his hand on it, and it just mushroomed from there. You're going to hear a little bit more about that today because someone who is very close to him is our guest. I highly recommend you read and listen to as much of each of these men, these faithful men, as you can. You will be blessed, as even in their death, their words of truth and grace and love will help you in every area of your life and faith walk. Now, if you're not familiar with Focus on the Family, that's, as I mentioned, what Dr. Dobson started, you'll want to stay tuned for our guest today. And if you're not familiar, you'll want to stay tuned to find out more about this incredible organization, again, founded by Dr. Dobson, that has stood strong for marriage and family from a biblical worldview for nearly 50 years, and in a culture that has become increasingly hostile to these things. We've seen that with Charlie Kirk, and so stay tuned for segment 1 coming right up.
Online at kyvoice.org.
Building Healthy Relationships, DBA Love and Lordship's vision and mission is to restore and help maintain a biblical worldview through healthy people, relationships, families, and communities that are foundational to thriving societies, governments, education, and all cultural influencers and outcomes. Today, we have a very special guest, Mr. Gary Schneeberger, who's the Assistant to the President for Media Relations from Focus on the Family. Now you know why I went on about them in my opening segment. Gary, first of all, welcome, and I hope I got your title correct.
You did indeed, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, Greg, so thanks for having me. And it's a special day to be here, too, as we'll talk about.
It is, and I want to thank you for taking some time out from what I know is a demanding schedule to join us. Gary, we would be remiss, I think for two reasons, if we did not address the assassination of Charlie Kirk and the incredible service that just happened a few days ago. Number one, because it is so sad and moving, and at the same time, he and the circumstances so powerfully set the table for our discussion today. How did that impact you, and what are we seeing as a result of his life and death?
Yeah, I mean, and you've heard many people far more qualified in knowing him. I did not know him. Saying it is that Charlie Kirk lived out a life very boldly, standing for truth in the public square, as you said, in the public square that very increasingly doesn't want to hear about the truth. They want to hear about my truth, your truth, everybody else's truth, as opposed to what is the truth, God's truth. And Charlie talked about that. And it's interesting. I did not know him, but I just called him Charlie because that's the way that you reacted. That he made you react to him. He was very easy to feel close with, feel camaraderie with, and it was a shock to the system and a shock for all of, especially the young people that he reached, who he encouraged to stand for their faith, to stand for God's truth in the public square. So, and the timing of it from Focus on the Family's perspective, we'll talk about this in more depth. I'll just set it up. On the 5th of September, 5 days before Charlie was assassinated, we released, Focus on the Family released, in partnership with the Colson Center, a documentary called Truth Rising, which is streaming now free on YouTube, has been since the 5th. But 5 days later, Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And what struck us as we grieved in that moment, it was that Charlie Kirk was exactly the kind of person, exactly the kind of example, the model that our movie Truth Rising hoped to create. And that is get everyday Christians to stand up for their faith, to step into their calling, to defend God's truths in the culture. Because what we're facing right now, and the movie makes a great case for this, is what we call a civilizational moment. And if we believe, right, the history books are full of civilizations, Rome, the Ottoman Empire, these empires that are no longer empires. They faded, they lost their place because they lost their way. And if we believe as Western culture that can't happen to us, we're sadly mistaken. And that's one of the things that Truth Rising really tries to drive home to folks who see it.
Yeah, so there's a great connection there, Gary, and we're going to get into that more throughout today's program. But I do want to dwell a little bit more on this because what we're hearing, I think all of us are, I know I am, and many others that I've talked to, and probably you as well, is this issue of revival that seems to be happening, and it seems like a tidal wave. I'd like to get your thoughts on this statement that I'm going to make. I believe there is a tidal wave of revival, but I also think that much of it may be focused on or grounded on emotion and passion, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think in order to keep that going, this is what Christ talked about when he said, I need disciples. I need people that can handle it when the emotion fades and the tidal wave subsides. How are you going to continue that revival? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I agree, and I think Focus on the Family, speaking for Focus on the Family, we agree too. We need revival. We need individuals, as I said, stepping into their calling, stepping into their faith. And I'm going to tell you a story, Greg, that will hopefully bring you some hope. My nephew, big fan of Charlie Kirk. He's 32 years old, recently married, has a 1-year-old son, and he's been leaning ideologically into a more conservative way of looking at the world. As a young boy, he is the only child of my late sister. So I've been very close to him for almost all of his life. And he watched Charlie Kirk's memorial service on Sunday. And there was a moment in that service where Charlie Kirk's pastor basically did an altar call in this huge stadium in Arizona, where he said, and around the country to the millions who are watching, if you believe right now, if you want to accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior right now, stand up wherever you're at. And I got a text from my nephew's wife, who said to me, you should know that your nephew just stood very proudly in our living room when that moment came. That's awesome. That's an example, Greg, of what you're talking about. We need revival. We need more people to embrace Jesus and then walk out the truth of Jesus in the culture. And I am, as a professional who works at Focus on the Family, I'm thrilled that we have another person on our side of not just the ideological aisle, not even the ideological aisle, but another brother. Very thrilled for that. But as the uncle of this young man, I'm thrilled that another member of my family is headed the same place I am when our time on this earth is done.
Yeah. And I hope this is true in line with that, Gary, and in line with what Truth Rising is talking about. I hope that we are at a place where our churches and our pastors and church leaders will awaken to this understanding that we can't continue the status quo. That's what got us to where we are today. And the difference between a lot of what is said in our churches and what Charlie Kirk said was he was unashamed of the whole counsel of God's word and the gospel, not just sort of a salvific or a salvation-only gospel, which is very important, but there's so much more to it. His Focus on the Family has touted for nearly 50 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons that the chief aim of this movie, Truth Rising, has been from the conception stage to get, to convince, to help coach and encourage people, Christians, to take a step into their calling, not to sit on the sidelines, not to just kind of engage with their sphere, their circle of closest influence, but to go into the world, to go into the culture and speak that truth. And the movie, in addition to talking about the civilizational moment that we need to do that, also spotlights several folks who have done that very thing, who've answered their calling despite the catcalling that comes when they've done so. And that's what we hope is the inspiration that this movie brings to those who see it.
Absolutely. I in our book, I mentioned earlier, we call that churchianity, and was staying within your group, doing the few things that the church tells you to do and thinking you're okay. But I've found that many of those people don't have a deep, abiding relationship or a loving relationship, which is the first and greatest command, with our Lord. And so that's part of what we need to do, and then be able to walk that out by influencing and impacting the culture around it. They may not listen, they may not like it. That's on them. But we have to be able to speak it boldly and graciously. Tell us a little bit more as we close out this segment about Focus on the Family, and it's across the board: marriage, family, parenting, culture, legislation, media, education. You all are in all of that.
Yeah, we are, and we've been in all of that for 48 years. In 2 years, in 2027, we will celebrate our 50th anniversary as an organization. Yeah, as an organization. And over those years, we have helped millions of couples navigate stormy waters. We all have them in our marriages. We've helped them raise healthy and hopefully Christ-centered kids. We've stood for the sanctity of human life boldly in the public square. Yes. And we have encouraged Christians to walk out their faith without being tentative, to walk out their faith boldly, because, right, Jesus is on our side. The truth that we speak with a capital T isn't my truth, it's Jesus's truth, and that makes an impact. So we have a number of programs that cover all of these kinds of areas, and every year we do a survey that indicates just how many families we've helped, and it's always more than 1 million families we've helped in some way or another through the radio show that we have, but through all these outreaches that we do. So every day is indeed, you said at the outset, it's probably a busy day at Focus on the Family. It is indeed, and part of that is because of what's happening today, and we'll talk about in the next segment, I'm sure, is what's happening today on X with Truth Rising.
Yeah. So listen, you're going to want to stay tuned. If you're listening or if you're viewing, you're going to want to stay tuned because we're going to get into this specific project. I think we've laid the foundation really well. We're hoping and praying for a powerful impact on individuals and our culture and churches. And I know you're going to share more on these key issues that come out of Truth Rising, the stories, the narrators, all that are involved. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we get into the next segment. Join us. Text your questions or comments to 502-571-0970. If you believe in the mission, would like to financially support us, text KY Voice to 53555. KY Voice to 53555.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KY Voice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
All right. Well, welcome back to Kentucky's Voice. I'm not your host. I'm the guest. But this is how exciting things are around here. The host had to run out. Greg had to run out and take care of something. So I'm Gary Schneeberger. I'm the assistant to the president for media relations at Focus on the Family. And I am here to talk to you today. And I'm very grateful for Greg for bringing me on to talk about not just Focus on the Family and what we do generally all the time, but also to talk about this new film that we have out called Truth Rising. You heard in the earlier segment just what the movie's about, and I'll go very quickly again what it's about. The movie is a documentary. It's free. You can find it on YouTube at the Focus on the Family YouTube channel, free to stream. And what it does really is a couple of things. First thing it does is it sets the stage globally for where Western civilization is right now. And here's, right, I won't bury the lead. Western civilization not in a good place right now, given all of the things that we've forgotten about our founding as a civilization. We have replaced God's truth with his truth, their truth, many truths, no truth. We've done that. And we are in a civilizational moment, as I said, that could put us in the same place as empires like the Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, all these throughout history that have passed away from the stage because they've lost their moorings. We are in more danger than we realize of losing our mooring as a civilization. So what Truth Rising does in the first third of the film, it's about an hour and a half long. In the first third of the film, we talk to experts about just where we are as a civilization and why it's so precipitous right now. But here's the good news. It doesn't end there, right? The first third of the film is not the end of the film, and you sort of have this depressed feeling after you've watched it. There's a second 2/3 of that film. And that's where we reach down and talk to folks in the culture now, specifically, mostly in America, who are doing exactly what is necessary to reestablish, to reinvigorate Western civilization. And that is stand for truth boldly, stand for God's truth with Christ's heart. And there are a number of people that this film goes through in its last 2/3 who are doing that. One of them I'll bring up. You probably heard his name before, Jack Phillips. Jack Phillips is the baker in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, who one day in his shop, a gay couple came in and they wanted him to make them a wedding cake. And Jack didn't yell at anybody. Jack didn't call anybody any names. He wasn't Jack. I can't imagine Jack Phillips, having met him, ever being angry. Jack Phillips simply said, I'll make you cookies. I'll make you anything I can that you want from my shop, but I can't use my skills. I can't use the gifts that God gave me to go against God's truth. And he stood up and he could not. He didn't even refuse to do it. Refuse sounds like very aggressive. He didn't do that. He just simply said, I can't do it. And that was the start of what ended up being a Supreme Court case that he won. That's one of the triumphant stories we talk about in Truth Rising. And now our host is back, Greg. It's great to see you. I just talked a little bit more about Truth Rising and some of the courageous voices who are in the second 2/3 of the film.
Okay, Gary, thank you. Daniel, I'm sorry. Sorry, listeners and viewers. My computer just crashed on me. I think it's the enemy at work, but I knew Gary could handle it and Dan could handle it. So I'm back, and we certainly want to continue with this. Gary, let me ask you this. Did we show the clip? Did Dan show the clip to start the segment?
I don't believe so.
Okay. It was there's one in the next segment too. So hopefully you as listeners, viewers in particular, will be able to see the clip, at least one of the clips. But you talked about a civilizational moment, and every one of these things speak to that, Gary. Every one of them speak to that. And so tell us a little bit more about what the purpose behind that seeing that was. The Bible calls it a Kairos moment.
Yep.
So what are we talking about there so our listeners can understand that?
Yeah, we are talking about what does the future of Western civilization look like? What is the future of Western civilization? There are a bunch of people, again, in that first third of the movie, many of them historians, theologians, who know far more about far more things than I do. But they make a very compelling and a very easy to understand and a little bit unnerving case for where Western civilization could go if we don't muster the courage to stand for truth in the public square, if Christians don't step into their callings to do that. Because, again, one of the cases made in that first third of the film about this civilizational movement is that this is a civilization that was founded. Western principles are Christian principles. That's what founded Western civilization. It doesn't mean that we're a quote unquote Christian nation or a theocracy or any of that stuff, but the people who were at the controls of building this civilization believed in capital T truth. Yeah. And where we sit now as a culture, as a civilization, having rejected in many, far too many cases, that capital T truth. That's what we have to get back. And that's what these courageous voices profiled in the film. That's what Charlie Kirk did, which is why we're dedicating today's release on X to Charlie Kirk. And that's what we hope those who watch the movie will find the inspiration and the courage to take that stand to save the civilization.
Absolutely. When you say, I want to explain that a little further. When you say capital T truth, we're basically talking about an objective, absolute truth. And we as believers know that comes from God's word. And
correct.
So that's what we're doing in this movie, in this documentary, which is extremely well done, by the way. But you also talked about Western civilization, Western culture, and we know that it's in decline because we have run from or disregarded that truth. Share a little bit more about that, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a time now, folks, where people are not comfortable standing for truth because they worry about offending people, or it's your truth is your truth. How many times have we heard that? Well, your truth may be what you want to believe, but the truth is the truth. God's truth is the truth. Just like, gravity is the truth, right? God's truths are bedrock just like that. And to get away from those things, we run the danger as a civilization to no longer enjoying the blessings of God on the level that we have been doing it. And again, the film makes a very good case for how that is indeed the case now in the culture. That's why that turning point that comes about 1/3 of the way through the film, where we begin to explore young people, older people who are taking stands for God's truth at cost to themselves. None of these people who have taken a stand that we profile in this movie has it been easy. And we don't want people to watch this film and think this is going to be a cakewalk. This is going to be easy. This is going to be, a vacation. It's not. Standing for God's truth is something that requires courage. It requires boldness. And that's what we hope to create here. And that's why we've dedicated the film on X to Charlie Kirk, because he modeled those things every day of his public life.
Yeah, at the pinnacle. He was one of the best at it. What has been the early feedback on this? I know you've had other platforms. You're releasing it on X today, which is an incredible day for us to be on. Appreciate you doing that. What's been the early feedback on the platforms it's already been on?
Yeah, it's been overwhelming. We've had more than probably 500,000 people have seen it by now. Which is just amazing. And the feedback, we have members of our teams, our team and the Colson Center's team, who go through the YouTube comments every day and pull out, and they are just the most, think of the greatest endorsement you ever saw for a film on a movie poster for a Marvel superhero movie or whatever that might be. These are 5 times more evocative than what you see in Hollywood films.
Yeah, so stick with us for segment 3 here. Join us or text your questions and comments to 502-571-0970. Believe in the mission, support financially. Text KY Voice to 53555.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Hey, welcome back, Gary. And I got to thank you, brother, for stepping in and being the host and the guest when my computer crashed. I don't know what happened. Never had that happen before, but we know there's an enemy out there who'll do anything he can to stop the truth. So I'm going to attribute it to him, and we're going to get through it. So appreciate that.
And I have to tell you, I'm an old newspaper guy, so I'm a writer. So like this face never got to be, I was thrilled. I was like, I got to admit, I was probably hoping a little bit that you weren't going to come back just so I could do it for a little bit. So thank you for the opportunity.
So instead of blaming it on the enemy, we'll blame it on you, Gary.
Amen. Yeah.
No, I appreciate it. Hey, we've got a clip here, and I know we're getting it ready. But before we get into that, I'm gonna switch gears here a moment, because you and I talked about this a little bit before. We're baseball fans. Yep. And you're a Cub fan. So I asked you about the playoffs, which they're in, and your comment, there it is right there. Your comment was, I'm glad they're in. I don't have much hope. Are you excited?
Cautiously so, fatalistically so. That's what Cub fans do, right? It took us 107 years to win a World Series in my lifetime. And we haven't won one since, and I blame people in Chicago. People wore T-shirts. They had T-shirts made, just one before I die. And I've thought, couldn't we have been a little bit more ambitious?
Optimistic?
How about 2? Right. How about 3 before I die? No, just 1 before I die. So hopefully we get more than 1. But I am optimistic, cautiously and fatalistically so.
Well, I've got an interesting personal connection with that. One of the young men that played basketball for me when I was a high school coach and athletic director, Andy Green, was the bench coach for the Cubs a few years back. Yeah. And now is the player development manager for the New York Mets. So I don't know. I like the Reds, and now the Mets and Reds are deadlocked. For the last 3 games. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. But
flip a coin.
Thanks for sharing. It's always exciting. Sports gives us some of that real life stuff. So it's always exciting to do that. Hey, we talked in the last segment, about Western culture and civilization being in decline, and it's very concerning. Knowing that these things have and are happening, there would be people that say a lot of this film is alarmist. How would you respond to that?
It's not. It's only alarmist if you don't understand that it's true, right? Alarmism is this is something I'm doing to try to gin up, froth. Right. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying not to gin up froth. We're trying to encourage calling. We want Christians to take their place in the culture, that they're the ones who can help guide the country through these challenges that we face, to speak boldly for God's truth and to do it as Charlie Kirk did with Christ's heart. That's the thing that we're hoping this movie does, is it gets Christians off the couch, out of the pews, and into the communities so that we can stand for truth, because we know what's right. We know what God has, how God's created families. We know how God's created cultures. We know how God's done those things. We should be the ones. We can be the ones who can help lead that conversation in the public square.
Gary, I've said many times to many pastors and church leaders that how in the world are we going to get that truth out there? Because God didn't entrust it to the White House, the courthouse, the schoolhouse. He entrusted it to your house, my house, and his house. And
Amen.
if we don't get outside and get into the culture, into media, government, education, healthcare, technology, then the truth is not going to get out there, because he entrusted it to us as believers and disciples of Christ. And that's what I see Truth Rising really trying to get people to do, is to get them out into these different venues and quit allowing the culture to dictate what they say and when they say it and how they say it.
Oh, absolutely. It's underneath it all is to encourage, yes, but also to embolden, to make Christians, to help Christians feel powerful, to help them feel like not only do they have a voice that is important for the culture to hear, because sadly, many of us have abdicated that role and responsibility for whatever reason. There are many, perhaps fear, no one's going to listen, those kind of things. The movie is designed to light that fire. That's why there's so many stories in it from so many what we call courageous voices. Somebody who speaks out, somebody who we feature in this film is going to trigger, right? It's going to click with someone. Oh, I can do that, right? Because here's the thing. I talked about Jack Phillips, right? Not all of us are going to be able to be Jack Phillips in terms of fighting all the way to the Supreme Court for your right to not use your skills to do something that's against God, God's truth. But we don't have to do it the way Jack Phillips did it. We can be like that because Jack Phillips didn't wake up and say, I'm going to do this today. So something happened to him. Something was brought to his doorstep, and he determined in that moment that he was going to stand boldly for God's truth. We all have that ability. When culture crosses in our paths, we can say, okay, I'm going to back up, or we can move forward, speak lovingly, speak truthfully, and truly endeavor to make a difference.
Yeah, a couple of comments come to mind as you say that, Gary, and that story about Jack and all the others in Truth Rising. They're all incredible. Right. But conviction without courage gets nothing done. You can be convicted that you're doing something right, but not do anything about it, or doing something wrong and not change, and nothing else has changed. So you have to have the courage to act on the conviction. And so one of the things in this movie, hopefully we get the clip, but if not, I'll explain just a little bit of it. I was really impressed with Winston Marshall, the British musician and influencer. He was very bold in his comments that were strong in faith to say some things. What did you find about his interview?
Yeah, I mean, here's a guy, a famous man, right? A man who's got a life that so many people long for, right? Not that it's easy, not that being famous and being in a band, but he at first. He's in the band Mumford & Sons. He had said something that wasn't taken well. He sort of stepped back and retracted what he was saying or what he had said because he didn't want to cause harm to the band. And then he realized, no, that wasn't courageous of me. That was the easy route. To take back what I said was the easy route, especially he didn't really want to take it back. He wanted to double down on the truth that he expressed. Yeah. So he retracted his retraction, and he left the band. So that was the way that he took care of his bandmates, his friends, by leaving the band. But he kept standing for the truth, as we said before, with a capital T. That's the thing that he did, and that's the model there. It can be so easy to think the way to wrap this up, if someone comes back and it's wokeism, it's been called, if someone's been canceled and he was canceled, or there was an attempt to cancel him, you can retract what you say so that you get uncanceled. Okay, that's one approach. Or you can double down on what you said and not worry about being canceled. Yeah. Accept that as the price of walking in God's truth, expressing God's truth to the culture. That's what he did, and that's what all of us can do, and what the movie urges all people to do.
Yeah, and that makes my point perfectly when I said conviction without courage there is no change, gets nothing done. I think it was Aristotle that said courage is the greatest of all virtues, because without it, you cannot express or live out any of the others. So that's what we're seeing. And here's a guy that was popular, sought out in the band, and then he makes a statement that's difficult for them to live with, and even many in the culture to live with. And he comes back and has to weigh basically what you're saying, and what he had to do was weigh, here's my popularity, my fame, my livelihood, my riches, so to speak, and yet I'm going to retract so I can keep all those. And then he went further with the courage of his conviction to say, no, I'm going to recant on my retraction and come back to say, because I really, truly believe that. And that's what we need. We talked about on a show that I did last month, or maybe the month before, when they settled on the Johnson Amendment. One of the comments I made here in the United States was, I hope we find out that pastors and leaders were really concerned about what might happen if the IRS comes after them, or will we find out that they knew all along that that wasn't really the issue? They were more concerned about being liked and people disagreeing with them, even if they were speaking the truth. And I think that's what this is all about. Yeah.
And I do hope that we get the clip of Winston. And if we don't, just watch it in the film, folks. It's on Focus on the Family's YouTube channel. It's called Truth Rising. Because when you see him in this clip, which we're going to show in the next segment, I believe, when you see him, folks, in this clip, he's passionate. He believed the things that he said when he got canceled. But I have to believe that he believes them even more now, if you listen to the way he talks about it now, because he was canceled. Because, to use the title of the film, he saw the power of truth rising. He saw that power, and he doesn't want to lose that. He wants to continue to bring that forth to the culture, because that is the way to knock away civilizational decline.
Yeah, that's what we've got to be able to do. And unfortunately, Gary, we both know, and many others know, and many people have been calling for it. That's what's been missing. This I called it earlier. This salvific, individualistic gospel really calls us into a relationship of saved in Christ, but very little else left. Very little after that. What can churches, as we close this segment out, what can churches and leaders do to begin to change this?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. One, go to truthrising.com. In addition to the film, we haven't talked about it yet, but there is a study, a 4-part study that will help you as church leaders and will help individuals how to begin to walk out your calling. It's a step-by-step process. So truthrising.com, Truth Rising, the study, sign up for that. That's also free of charge to watch.
Yeah. So again, hopefully we'll all be with you when we start segment 4. Thinking that that's going to happen, and it looks like it's going to. But thanks for joining us, and stick with us for segment 4. Again, contact us with your text questions or comments, 502-571-0970.
Kentucky's Voice is your home for real news, real people, and real answers. But we can't do it without you. Your financial support helps us bring truth to the forefront, hold leaders accountable, and give a voice to the people of the Commonwealth. Join the fight today. Give online at kyvoice.org or text KYVoice to 53555. Every gift makes a difference. Stand with us. Speak up. Stay strong. You are Kentucky's voice.
Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
Now, many people face a similar challenge. Will they speak out or be silent, stand up or step back? What advice would, obviously not just the music industry, but people in politics, people in journalism, people in business, what advice would you give to people who face that conscience struggle that you faced?
People are terrified to tell the truth. And we have a society of cowards. And it's time for people to stop caring and to put the truth first, because it's a fast track to totalitarianism. And there's such evil that's being done because people are scared to speak up. Look what's happening in trans ideology. We're butchering our children at the taxpayers' expense. Look what is happening with the grooming gangs in this country. The Manchester Arena, the grooming gangs is an amazing case of this. Politicians, the police themselves, and the media are terrified to talk about the tens of thousands of white girls who have been raped, and some of them killed because they are white, because they're scared of it being politically incorrect, seeming racist. Do you realize what evil is being done because you don't have the courage to speak up? Another example was the Manchester Arena bombing at the Ariana Grande concert. I think it was 2017. Someone saw the bomber with the backpack on, a security in the Manchester Arena, and didn't intervene because he was scared that he might be called racist if he did. And all those children were murdered then. Mm-hmm. This is what not saying the truth, it's seriously damaging. It's not just little white lies, it's not just like nodding your head. But at a society level, when we don't tell the truth, at the level we are not telling the truth, our daughters are being murdered and raped.
How do people respond now? You've made your stand, you've broken with that, you've refused to self-censor, as you put it. How do people respond now to where you're challenging them?
I have plenty of people. It's actually amazing. Online, firstly, I have amazing people that are supporting me. I walk around London now and people will come up to me and say thank you because they can't talk, which is kind of a crazy thing. Again, we're not living in the Soviet Union. This isn't Nazi Germany. Why can't they talk? We should be able to talk. So that's...
Yeah, that's the clip, listeners and viewers. That's the clip we were talking about in our last segment. We can get into it a little bit more in this segment, but we wrap up today's program with special guest Gary Schneeberger of Focus on the Family, encouraging you to take the time to watch this entire film and then trust the Lord to show you what he's calling you to do. Join us in this show. Text your questions or comments to 502-571-0970. If you believe in the mission and would like to financially support us, text KY Voice to 53555. That's KY Voice to 53555. So as mentioned, if you're just joining us, our special guest today is Gary Schneeberger of Focus on the Family. Gary, it's been a pleasure and very insightful to have you with us. I want to be sure to get your thoughts on which of the incredible real-life stories and or this clip, this interview we just saw, were some of your favorites.
Yeah, I mean, this one is a favorite of mine because, again, think about the way Winston Marshall sounded there. He sounded not angry. I mean, he was energized, yeah. But he was someone who has been through the fire of the culture of cultural wokeism. He's been through the fire. He's come out the other side, and he's come out the other side after engaging for truth in the culture, believing that everybody needs to do that. He said this: put the truth first. Right? That was one of his first statements. Put the truth first. He talked about people being afraid of, so afraid if they say this, they're going to be thought that. He's been through it. And you heard it, folks. You saw him. He's still here, right?
Yeah.
There was an attempt to cancel him, and he's not canceled because he's in this movie. I think that's a great example for us to embolden us to do the very thing that he did. It's not. When you watch the movie, you'll see Jack Phillips, who's a very soft-spoken, quiet man, the exact opposite of what you just saw in Winston, who's a very energetic speaker. But they both have the same truth running through their veins. But it doesn't stay there. The truth doesn't stay in their veins, in their heads, or in their mouth. They speak it. They live it. And that is what is going to change the culture, is going to re-strengthen Western civilization. That's what I hope comes out of this movie. And there are several stories like that in the film. You asked me to my favorites. That's one of them. Another one of my favorites, I think, is Seth Dillon, who's the CEO of the Babylon Bee, right? The Christian satire site.
Yeah.
And the story he tells in this movie is fascinating because he talks about how the U.S. government named a man who identified as a woman, who was going through transition or identified as a woman, named this man who identified as a woman as Woman of the Year. And Seth Dillon and the Babylon Bee wrote a story in their satire site that said, no, this person is Man of the Year. Right. And Twitter froze their account. Froze the Babylon Bee's account, wouldn't let him go out anymore. And he refused. Seth Dillon refused to change that. If he would have changed it, he could have got his account back. He could have not been canceled. It would have been great.
Millions of viewers.
Right, millions. But what ended up happening is that Elon Musk comes in. He starts talking to Seth about, why don't you just take the thing down? Well, no, because free speech is worth standing for. Lo and behold, as they get to develop a relationship, Elon Musk says to him in a message exchange, maybe I'll just have to buy Twitter. Well, look what happened. He bought Twitter the day that he bought Twitter. Seth talks about it in the film. The day he bought Twitter, called it X, he said to Seth, free speech will not be censored on this platform anymore. That's a great story because what that does, hopefully it emboldens you folks. It gives you hope that when you stand for truth, good things can happen, not just to you, but to the culture.
Yeah. And I think part of that, Gary, is the faith that is required. That's why their conviction takes courage, because when you take that stand, the initial response in every one of these cases was very negative. And so it took faith for Winston Marshall and Seth Dillon to go, I'm going to stay the course. And by every account, Jack Phillips and Chloe and all of them, by every account, their conviction, the courage that they express leads us to believe they're not going back. And so that's powerful. And that's what this film does. Let me ask you this, Gary. There are many prayers that arise in the viewing of this movie and the reality that it shares. What would be the main prayer for truth rising? And secondly, what is your prayer for Christians and their response or responses?
Yeah, I think the main prayer for the film, we're often very, especially in a movie, that the prayer would be that people would see it, and for sure, we want people to see it. But more than a movie, we want this to be a movement. And I think the best prayer for people who see this movie to come away with, I know it's the prayer I came away with when I first saw it, and that's this: Lord, help me to find my courage, my conviction to stand up for your truth in a culture that has dismissed it, has marginalized it, doesn't believe it. Begin praying about this movie, not at the cultural level, do it at the personal level, that you would have the wisdom, you would have the courage, you would have the boldness to follow your calling. And by follow it, I mean follow it into the culture and stand for God's truth in the culture that has rejected so many times, so very vehemently many times, God's truth.
I'm going to be sharing the opening devotional at the Kentucky Family Forum tomorrow morning that I mentioned in the outset of the program. And what I call it in there is a holy boldness. a holy boldness. How can they join the movement? You talked about the movement. You talked about a study guide. Kind of close us out here with those two things, Gary.
Sure. Everything is at truthrising.com. That's where you can see the movie if you haven't seen it. You can also see it on X if you look at Focus on the Family's X profile today, because it just launched there today in memory of Charlie Kirk. But you can get the film at truthrising.com. It's on our YouTube channel. It's free. But the study is a video curriculum. It's a video study, 4 parts that talk about the 4 elements that go into embracing your calling, right? Identifying God's truth, and identifying what your calling is. That's something that you can do individually. You can do it as a small group in your church. That's really the next step. The movie is designed to get people to recognize there's a need for this, and to encourage them that I want to take that step. I want to take that step. I want to take a stand. I can't be Chloe Cole. I can't be, Seth Dillon, but I can be me, and I can in my own way and my own circumstances do that. And that study, Truth Rising the study, will show you how to do that, and will encourage you and strengthen you at the same time.
Absolutely. Gary, thanks again for joining us. You've done a fabulous job, and I apologize for the technical difficulties, but you guys handled it great, and I'm glad to get back with you. Again, if you believe in this mission and would like to support Kentucky Voice, text KY Voice, KYVOICE, to 53555. Again, Gary, thanks for joining us. I don't think there's a better way to conclude today's program than to quote the tremendous challenge that Os Guinness gave to John Stonestreet and to all of us in the letter tucked in the book written by William Wilberforce. That's a name. If you don't know about that, or Amazing Grace, the movie, check that out for sure. He gifted that book to John, and it had been signed by William himself. Like the great man who penned this book, Oz says to John, we have been called by God to our own moment in history. And in answering that call, we will find the fullest purpose and meaning for our lives. And may we live and work boldly for no other accomplishment than to one day hear the caller declare, well done. And now, just as I have tried in my own time, I challenge you and your generation to continue in firm conviction with the task that the Lord has given you. I'm expecting great things, all the very best, Oz. I thought that was powerful. No better way to end it, because it wasn't just to John. It's what you've been saying here throughout this program, Gary. That's to all of us, and we need to take that seriously. Now,
absolutely. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, the battle rages on. I pray, and when I pray with faith and therefore expectation that God is on the move, and he will stir all those who are willing to hear and respond to be on his side and stand firm in the whole counsel of his word of truth for his kingdom and glory. I'm Greg Williams, and thanks for joining me as you're listening to or viewing Kentucky's Voice. Make it a great day, and God bless in the love and lordship of Christ.